Tonight we continue our series of pre-election interviews with a candidate for state representative in the 11th Suffolk District, currently represented by Liz Malia. The district includes parts of Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Roslindale and Grove Hall. Our guest is one of the challengers in the Democratic primary on September 4th. We'd like to welcome Ture Turnbull. Thank you very much for being with us, Ture.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ture, this is not your first campaign in the way, because you were involved before in a campaign about single-payer health care. Talk about that.
Sure. So for the last 5 years, I've been the executive director of Mass Care, a statewide coalition of 83 organizations, about 250,000 members. The nurses, the teachers are all members of that coalition. We've been fighting for healthcare justice, and we're able to pass a bill through the Senate with a 35-3 vote. But when I'm talking about healthcare justice, just let me explain, we're talking about Medicare for all. Basically taking the healthcare system that we have with Mass Health and expanding it to all residents from birth to death in Massachusetts.
Now, what I also know about the State House is you've got some competition from some other kinds of stakeholders out there, especially the business community. They're trying to bring down the cost that the state is already paying for health care. So how do you combat that?
Sure. So, I mean, the business community, the small business owners that I've been talking to are being crushed by the healthcare delivery system. I've talked to small owners that said that they would love to hire another 3 or 4 employees, but they can't afford the insurance. So when it comes to small business and the future of Massachusetts, we have to address healthcare because it's 43% of our state budget, and it takes up all the resources for all the things that we do care about, from housing and transportation and education. We can't talk about investing in families until we talk about how we pay for our healthcare.
Well, another thing you might not want to see happen too quickly, at least, is other employers who are already sponsoring coverage for their employees saying, hey, we could stop doing this now because we got universal Medicare. I mean, is that going to happen, or is there a way you can stop that?
So it would be an expansion of the current system. So, I mean, when I say current system, I mean Mass Health, Medicaid and Medicare dollars put together. President Obama in 2017 allowed through the ACA for the state to funnel all of our resources into one pool and then to expand it. So it's not in competition to private insurers, it is the answer to it. The elimination of the private insurers, as we pay 30% of every healthcare dollar goes to an insurer that has nothing to do with the delivery of care. That's why I was proud to get Dr. Don Berwick's endorsement, as we have to move to a bold, progressive solution, not just a Band-Aid.
Well, when you started working on that solution 5 years ago, Obama was still president, and and ACA looked pretty much the way of the future.
Yeah.
Now we have a different president and a different presence. How vital is it right now to do something like that?
Oh, it's more vital than ever. I'm glad that you acknowledge that we have basically what I say, a monster in the White House. If he's going to attack the ACA, which he has, and Medicaid and Medicare dollars, the only way to protect it is to expand it. If every resident has it, it'll be so much more difficult for the White House then to take it away.
This is BNN News, and we're talking about Ture Turnbull, candidate for state representative in the 11th Suffolk District. Ture, what's also going on in the state right now, there's a battle at the State House about money for education. The state Senate recently came up with some recommendations to help essentially the district schools and as well as the charter schools. But what about the House on this? And you're running for the House, so what do you see?
Sure. This is part of the reason why I'm running, is that good bills come from the Senate, just like the one I passed about healthcare for all and Medicare. Great bills come out of the Senate and then go to a very conservative House and just die. So we're talking about Chapter 70 formula funding. It's 23 years since we've addressed how Boston is funding its public schools. We have some of the best colleges in the world, and in their shadows are schools from BPS that the students will never be able to attend. We should have the best schools in the world, and until we fund them appropriately, we can't. And this is where the conservative House is letting our students, our teachers, and our parents down, and they're letting down the future of our city and our state.
Well, I can imagine some of those conservatives, maybe some moderates in the House saying, nice idea, but where's the money going to come from?
Well, this is another very frustrating thing. The millionaire's tax was just shot down by our Supreme Court here in Massachusetts. But had we had courageous, bold, progressive leaders in the House, we could have passed it legislatively. It didn't have to go to a ballot question. So the millionaire's tax would have given another $30 billion to $3 billion to public education. I mean, we have to look at how we're generating revenue and what is fair. What is a progressive tax instead of the regressive taxes we have?
Another issue is criminal justice. I'm sure that's important in at least parts of this district, maybe the whole district. There have been some incremental gains. Do you see any new things that have to be added to this down the line?
Sure. No, I think that there are some achievements that they were able to make in the last bill. It's about time, though, and what we need to go further is, solitary confinement is criminal. I mean, that's punishment to, it's cruel and unusual punishment, and then also mandatory minimums are proven not to work and still remain part of our criminal justice system.
Well, in Boston, we have some kind of safe communities, not exactly a sanctuary for unauthorized immigrants, but something approaching that.
Mm-hmm.
At the State House, there's an attempt to have something done like this on a statewide level. First of all, why do you think that much more is important?
So back to protecting ourselves and leading the nation again. Massachusetts hasn't really led the nation in 14 years. But when it comes to Safe Communities Act, it's how we protect ourselves from President Trump. So this is the Safe Communities Act, for your viewers that don't know, would make Massachusetts a sanctuary state, but more specifically, it would stop the coordination with ICE. It is time that we protect ourselves from that and go further with the environment too. Our EPA could be leading the nation, but the Safe Communities Act, we need to pass that. But my opponents and also this conservative House has said that now is the time for education. Families are being broken up. ICE is at our New Hampshire border waiting for people to drive into Massachusetts. Families are being torn apart, and we're saying now is time for action, absolute action now to pass the Safe Communities Act.
Now, I don't see the governor going for this. Do you think there are enough votes, even after this election, to have a veto-proof approval?
I mean, that's another thing about having a supermajority in the House and Senate. We have a veto-proof, both houses, if we just had the courage to make Governor Baker stand by his convictions.
I've heard a lot about boldness and courage here, but you're running against a progressive incumbent. Mm-hmm. There are only so many places where progressives can win anyhow. I mean, is this all about boldness and courage? I mean, you're just going to replace another progressive. Does that really change things that much?
It's definition of progressive. I mean, I wouldn't vote to eliminate term limits for the speaker, basically making a speaker for life. I wouldn't take money from large developers in the housing crisis that we have. I would support tuition-free, debt-free college, which currently is not being supported. And I also would support single payer. Obviously, I support single payer. I passed the bill through the Senate. Current representatives in my district do not believe that that is the path to go. We need Medicare for all. We need bold progressive voices that don't say that the status quo is going to work and that the market can help us. We need to move beyond that. It's the role of government to lead.
I know you've got more details ready for people, so where should they check that out?
Sure. My website is Vote Turnbull. That's TURNBULL.com. Vote Turnbull.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Ture Turnbull, candidate for state representative in the 11th Suffolk District, and the election's going to be on September 4th. We'll have more news in just a moment.